Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sparring Partners. And today we talk about something that I'm not sure why, but I've never had a podcast on, which is Agentic AI. And that's clearly a hot topic, which deservedly so. It's a very common and debated, but also there is a lot of, I would say, maybe not misinformations, but a lot of simplification. And so I have Philippe Ensarguet at Orange. He is Vice President of Software Engineering, but also he is an Orange Fellow, and he just told me there's only 5 of them in the company. And he's focused on cloud software. So he does a lot of work, but he does a lot of thinking at Orange, I would say, which is the reason why I am so happy to have him here. And I'm going to anticipate this, that we're going to have a second podcast to talk about other things which are more higher level. Today, however, we're going to talk about Agentic AI. But before we do that, Philippe, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes, of course. I'm very, very happy and delighted to be with you, Monica, today. So my name is Philippe Ensarguet. I'm working at Orange, VP Software Engineering and Orange Fellow. So basically, my job is to support the transformation of Orange from a telco perspective to a techco perspective. So basically, my background is around all the ingredients that we are having in the digital ecosystem, the cloud, data, AI, automation, and try to support the telecom transformation. So it's, I would say, what is filling my days and a part of my nights.
Absolutely, and that's a really big task, because there is a technology, but then there's also the human element, and how do we put it all together? So how we put it all together is going to be the second podcast. But so today, let's talk about Agentic AI. I saw a presentation from you, and it was the best ever, despite the fact that everybody talks about it, because you really talked about what is good about it, what is that we should be paying attention to, the complexity of it. You didn't try to downplay it. So, but before we get to the complexity, let's just talk about what is Agentic AI. What should we care about it? Why is it that the models can just do it all?
Yes. It's a very good first question, Monica. And something that for me here is very, very important by setting the stage is perhaps to share with the audience that I truly believe that our industry is now entering into a new phase, and the implications for, I would say, everything, operations, governance, but also workforce are very, very profound. And for me, with Agentic AI, something that I really want to focus on is that it's not a feature evolution. It's a true fundamental shift. It's a fundamental shift in the role that AI will play in the enterprise. Because, we all remember that we have the generative AI madness since something like 4 to 5 years right now. But at best, generative AI is answering to question. While with Agentic AI, we are much more with something that performs tasks, uses tools, and drives operations. So it's mainly moving from, I would say, a passive assistance at best to an active execution. And for me, the real shift is not about the intelligence, it's about the autonomy. And we really need to understand that with greater autonomy comes a bunch of new questions about control, oversight, and also about accountability. And everything for me around agentic AI and the question that companies or my peers could ask are really need to be, I would say, in front of the current true generative AI capabilities, but also limitation. Today, when we are looking at the generative AI landscape, we got the LLMs, the foundation models that are understanding and generating text, but also bringing some emerging reasoning. No memory, no tools. So it means that if you want to have a relevant management or business workflow or whatever that is relevant to your business, to our business, we need to inject enterprise knowledge. And it's where the RAG, the famous RAG, has emerged, and the way to manage also the context that has enterprise context and reduce also the hallucination. So something that is very, very important to understand is that generative AI evaluates and explains very well, but it remains mainly passive. And doing and acting is truly the scope of AI agents and agentic AI systems. So it's very important for me to have this understanding in mind. And basically, the stack that we are having is not fire and forget with all that we made or learned in the last years, because something that's super important, we do not need to choose, we need them all, and we need to assemble all of them. The brain, the LLM, the knowledge, the RAG, and the actors that for me are the agents that are doing the reasoning, the deciding, and the acting. Remember, the LLM think, the RAG knows, and the agents do. And I think that it's extremely important to set the stage. And when we are talking about agentic AI, for me, one of the true implication and is really around integration, because at the end of the day, our businesses are made of integration at business level, process level, technical level, even at human level. So we really need to double click on basically what's changing when we are moving from traditional, I would say, integration ways to agentic one, moving from API calls to agentic AI orchestration. And I think it's super important to keep in mind that in this transformation, the integration is much more becoming a conversation than a contract that we got, I would say, with the API. Because with traditional API integration, we can say at a very high level that we have developers that are writing call to call APIs. We have predefined workflows that are managing the job and the sequence. But at the end of the day, it's the human who decide when and how we are integrating. With the agentic AI integration, it's much more different, adaptive, autonomous, and goal-driven. That for me is changing everything. The agent is discovering and orchestrating the API autonomously. We are having dynamic workflows based on the context, the goals, and the way the reasoning and the breakdown of the task are made. And something that also is truly different is that we have now in between a natural language that intend to replace all the rigid parameters that we may have. So we have AI that is deciding what is the optimal APIs combination and sequence. So for me, just as a wrap up on this one, I think that what is important to keep in mind is that in the agentic era, the APIs are becoming tools in an AI toolkit and not endpoints for the developer's code. So I think it's the real shift, moving from rigid deterministic developer control to adaptive, autonomous, and goal-driven integration.
Now, you raised a lot of issues here, but let me go back to one. So LLMs clearly they just like answer the more passive. They look at what's out there and they give you something. But a lot of AI models, AI and machine learning models, are actually more into the ability to optimize, to do things, to take decisions. So where do we draw the line between what an AI model can do, and
Oh,
where is that we need to bring the agent in? And then
okay.
the agent can also interact with LLMs, but or maybe you can give us a concrete example of where the model cannot do it. You need an agent for sure.
I think that your question is extremely relevant, Monica, here, because I want just to take one picture. You know, on those days on LinkedIn or Substack or on whatever places where we could learn with good material, we have this picture where we have ML, AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, and when we are looking at the graph, at the picture, basically the size of the bubble of agentic AI is, I would say, uh, much more important than the one we got in ML. But for real, if we were using true scale, we the size of the bubble won't be the same that we are currently using to do the graphical representation. And you're right, because today with quotes, with a lot of quotes around simple, we are able to do a lot with machine learning algorithm. Today, we are able to do very advanced churn management or churn estimation with machine learning model. And guess what? At Orange, but I'm truly sure it's the same for my peers. We don't wait it for generative AI to be here to use AI in our system. We are using AI since decades. And I would say that every era's brought a new achievement in terms of what we are able to do. But I think that we really need to understand that choosing the right tools to do the right thing is extremely important. And I know that we already talked about this when we met, when we were, if you remember, in Paris. I have always in mind my what I'm calling my golden rule zero. If a single model call or a deterministic script solve what you need to do, please don't consider to jump for agent or for agentic system, because you are opening a new door in terms of possibilities, potential, outcomes. But this door has this there is another door, and this door is the complexity door. It's the door where you need to ask you very strong question about what's the safety and the risk, what is the true determinism and the rule coverage I need to keep in mind. Is the latency and the SLA of my services or the control loop or the right one to be implementing in agentic? What's the true context complexity and the variability of my system to be, I would say, relevant in what I want to do? What are the guardrails and what is the reality of my tooling readiness to jump on the agentic? And the last one, that is perhaps the most important one, is the volume and the cost and the value that I'm generating is worthing to double click on an agentic AI implementation. So I want to be very clear here. You know me, Monica. I'm very fond of tech, and I'm really love to do my trailblazer rule to identify what will be the next gigs. But from time to time, it's extremely important to step back and really to understand what is the tool we need to use regarding the purpose or the topics that we have to solve. And I think it's a very important question that you bring there.
Yeah, and it's very refreshing to hear that we should not jump on to agentic AI for everything. And in fact, we should just go back to if then deterministic models where if we know what you're doing, if you know what the answer is, why not? Is so the first goal should be to reduce complexity and cost, regardless of the technology. And then you can, so basically what you're saying is that use deterministic if you can, use a model if you can, and then you go to the agent where there is something that clearly, because there is a lot of complexity that you do not want to ignore. And that's where you need to have something more specific. You might need you need the agent, but don't go to the agent unless you can avoid it effectively. Not because it's bad, but because it's so powerful that you don't want to need it. You don't need it unless you really need it. Like,
Yes.
you don't need to drive a big truck if a small car would do the job, right? I mean, it's the same kind of logic. Okay, so this is quite interesting. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is also you talked about you're doing a lot of work on the APIs, and I've been hearing from different sources that, with APIs, you cannot use agentic or you cannot use it. It's like, doesn't make any sense because agentic or AI should be able to learn to interface with everything. And the integration is important, but that's the whole point, right? You got something so intelligent that could just deal with everything.
Yeah.
So what's the deal there? How does AI bring in the APIs and
It's I think the very very important point here. I would say that the impact of using API in agentic, it's not a zero impact equation, and I will double click on. But what I really want you to bring here is that what's changing is that when you are having a traditional API-based integration, remember, it's deterministic, strict contract, and base and contract-based interaction. So you got an app or a service that want to use a backend service, and with API, we are only focusing on the what. We have a computer-based interaction through a contract where you are describing what are the services, the function you may call, with which parameters, what are the parameters, and so on. So it's extremely, I would say, predeterministic. With agentic, it's totally different. It means that we don't have a computer-based interaction, but we have a semantic-led interaction. And this semantic-led interaction is having a high impact because for the agent that want to benefit from the backend services, it's not only about the what, but it's only about the how, the when, and the what. The how, the when, and the what. So it's asking a lot of questions about the potential for discovery, the potential for versioning, the potential for how I'm designing, and the governance that are all behind. And something that for me is very interesting here is that it's mainly led, I would say, by this protocol that have been integrated by Anthropic that is called MCP, so model context protocol. It was early 2024, and something that I think is very very interesting is that we got, if I remember well, this MCP protocol integrated in the very recently created Agentic AI Foundation under the Linux Foundation umbrella. And I think it's just highlighting how much we really need to truly standardize this part and this ecosystem. But if I just step back about the API implication and strategy, I think that what we must keep in mind is that API must become agent friendly. So it means that the API providers should perhaps enhance the documentation with semantic description and provide clear example. Because you cannot pretend to know who or what agent with what capabilities will potentially use your API and make a call to your API. So it means that we clearly must have in mind this, I would say, documentation and semantic exposure if we want to have the semantic resolution. Something that also is very, very important is that because it's non-deterministic, I think that it will be hell more than ever about understanding what's happening on the system where when we will need to troubleshoot. So I think that in API, observability was extremely important. But honestly, with API in agentic, observability becomes even more critical because when the agent will orchestrate integration autonomously, and basically we will need to have a comprehensive logging, tracing, monitoring that will become absolutely essential to understand what the agents are doing and being able to make the diagnostic of the issues. But also the governance is evolving because with agentic AI, we will need much more fine-grained permission, certainly approval, from workflow perspective. If we are managing very sensitive operation, we will need to set new, I would say, guardrails to prevent harmful actions. And something that is very important, it's about the audit trails for the autonomous decision. So it has an impact also on the governance. But perhaps, and ending with this point that for me is certainly one of the most important, is that it truly changed the face of the human agent collaboration we are having. Because the future for me is not agents replacing human integration, but rather having agents that are handling routine orchestration while humans are focusing on the strategy, on the exception handling, on the complex business logic that requires judgment. And on this one, I read last week a very, very compelling article by Boris Cherny. Boris is the guy who is, if I remember well, the guy who invented Claude Code. And he testimonied about how he is using, I would say, agent in his pipeline coding process. And something that really struck me is that in the process, if it's like, like when you are in an in a music, lot of musician, and you have this guy that is the orchestrator, and he was doing the same. Five agents in his terminal, 10 more agents in his browser tab, and what struck me is that a part of what Boris is doing is to identify when the agent or when agent are failing, to grab how they fail and to document the failure mode into, I would say, a markdown a file to be sure that the agentic AI system has the ability to learn on what and why it fails, to do not reproduce what fails badly at a moment in time. So that's why I truly think that this human agent collaboration is absolutely critical. Understanding that we as human, I'm sure that we will focus more and more on strategy, exception handling, and on the business that is so complex that it requires judgment and understanding that just right now us as human are able to have. So it's what I can bring into this. I would say what changed into the API versus the agentic AI integration ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think that you make again several very fundamental points. So the issue is not the API plumbing, so to say. The API model is still good. It just has to evolve to be more useful, and so that the agents, AI models, can take advantage of it. So it's an opportunity in a way to get because APIs are having a little bit of trouble to
Mm.
how do we use them? I mean, that's true for every new technology. The question is how do you use it? And the AI agents are basically putting a little bit of pressure or a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to optimize rather than we're not saying get out, we don't need you, is we need you, but you need to get better to get the best out of everybody.
But Monica,
Yeah,
the impact and the potential is very, very
yeah,
interesting. I just want to take few minutes to explain you what I've got in mind. On my laptop, because I'm doing a lot of presentation, demo, and advocacy and so on, I've got code running traditional API call for device locator. So camera API on the mobile. So we got one API that is called device locator, and basically it's giving you the geographical information. So where is the number? On API, I'm writing hundreds line of codes to manage all the cases, all the error, and at the end, when I'm calling on my CLI my code, I'm having a very, very, very computational oriented information that will require to me a lot, a lot of work to do the interpretation. In the other hand, I have implemented the same device locator camera API that is working on our Orange Playground. exposed through an MCP servers. And I'm using my chatbox AI as a conversational agent where I'm plumbing my MCP, doing the exposure of the camera API, and where on my CLI, on my coding API, I was just asking something like node, device locator, my phone number. Here, I have a conversation. Hey, please, can you tell me where is this phone number? And I have multiple phone numbers in my playground, and in particular, people that are French roaming in Germany in the Brandebourg door area. And something that is very, very funny, and I was very surprised when I realized this at the first time. I ask, where is this first phone number? So I've got all the information. It was this person, and he was not latitude and longitude, but I was told he was in Berlin, close to Brandebourg, and I asked my second phone number. And I've got the same information. And guess what? At the end of the reasoning, the answer that I've got is that, hey, it's funny. The two mobile users are in the same areas. The reasoning is able to do, I would say, interpretation that are quite interesting. And honestly, it's with a very simple device locator API. But let's imagine what we are able to do with all the other API we may have for fraud, for identity, for geofencing, for slicing, for whatever. It's truly deeply changing the way we could assemble, I would say, the services. And something that is also super different that we didn't talk is about error management. When you have an API call and you have an error, basically the programs is stopping because there is an error. With the model is understanding that there is an error, and it will try to double click on the error and to fix the error and or to find another way to achieve the goal. So it's totally different. So that's why I really want to bounce off on what I said at the very beginning of our conversation. We are not in front of a future evolution. It's a true fundamental shift, and it's for me an example of what I really want to bring to your audience.
No, this is somewhat of a side, not really a side. It's a fundamental question, but you mentioned, all the information you can find, but then obviously there is a question of privacy, security, guardrails, regulation. And US is a little bit lagging behind, but Europe is a little bit more on top of things, I think. But how should we think about it?
You are asking the right question, Monica, because if I want to be very transparent with you, I already shared with you or in other communication what we did at Orange, and we got a lot of agentic AI a part in the Orange Open Tech event that we got in last November. So the flagship technological and innovation event at Orange. It was about network troubleshooting scenario, 5G security operation. It was about RAN optimization. So a bunch of different example and telco networks domain. The true reality is that to make those use case scaling, what we need to tackle is not in agentic, is outside agentic. And we really need to understand that none of what we are talking since few minutes right now will happen if we are not able to manage, I would say for me, 5 critical topics. The first one, and you double click on, is about security. MCP has no security by book. So it means that the AAA authentication, authorization, accountability is something you need to bring. So some MCP gateway or on Kubernetes ingress, egress filtering or gateway, we are able to manage the security. But what is super important is when you understand uh, the potential of exposing your asset to agentic, You need also to understand that you are having a blast radius in terms of potential impact that is absolutely tremendously much more important. Beware of leakage, beware of injection, because you can poison a model very, very simply. And honestly, it has been demonstrated a lot of time. So having the security is a must-have number one. Manage your authentication, manage your authorization, manage your accountability of your agentic AI system and the tooling environment. Second one is about observability. I already talked about this, but honestly, when you have complex systems that are deterministic, from time to time, it's complex to do the observability. We are entering in a total new game because with non-determinism, the observability will be much, much more complex. The third one is about the testing and the debugging. Because of the complexity of the system, we may integrate. Let's say we have a customer that is facing a quality of experience issues while he was watching his favorite streaming services. We, as a vendor, we could imagine that the agent is going to use perhaps a 5G slicing services to bring more premium communication quality services. But what's happening if instead of using an agent for a slice, is just changing the codec of the encoding of your video? At the end of the day, from user standpoint, it will perhaps solve my issues of quality, but it has a strong impact on who is delivering the services and who will make money with the services. So it's why the non-determinism is, for me, something super important in the testing and debugging. We have also the AI agent execution, self-containment, and isolation, because we must take into account that the agent could fail. And the last point is how much confident we are in AI result at a reasonable level to be sure that we want to push in production our services that could be read only and human action, and then having automated up to the action made and managed by the agent. So for me, those five topics are not in directly in the agentic ecosystem, but they are super important. Security, observability, testing, debugging, self-containment and isolation, and confidence. And for me, honestly, I can't be wrong, but I can't see how serious company can scale and grade services with agentic without managing those topics that for me are absolutely mandatory if we want to, I would say, operate the service with the right confidence.
And I think that you point out something very important here, that is all those issues. Actually, none of them it's new. It's not inherently within agentic AI or AI. But what's happening is that because with the increasing complexity and increasing the ability of doing things, you just get an order of magnitude bigger problem. It's
Exactly.
nothing new, but it's much bigger. The scale is just growing incredibly. And so issues like observability becomes much more of an issue because the complexity is higher. It's not
Mm,
because it was never an issue. It has always been an issue, but it was an easier issue to deal with than it is now. Now, I want to ask you a final question because we don't want to be here forever.
yes.
So you have a bunch of agents out there in your network. And just as humans do, they might disagree with each other. So you might have one that tries to reduce power consumption and the other one that wants to improve the user experience, and they might disagree with each other. How do you manage that? Because you can say, well, I'm going to have another agent that, but then we just have this infinite number of agents
Yeah.
trying to resolve issues. How do we deal with that?
Um, you're right. For me, I'm not pretending that I have a definitive question for your answer, but a way to tackle this is to always remember that we are talking about agentic AI systems that are goal-driven. So it's really about one goal. It's not goals driven, it's goal driven. So it's a unicity around what goal we want to achieve. And it means that also, Monica, one of the core principles when you are implementing agentic AI system is what I'm calling SRP. SRP is single responsibility principle. So having agents that are doing only one thing extremely narrow, extremely well, to be sure that they won't address topic that are connects to what they must do. So to try to limit as much to what the agent need to do interactive with its system. So I'm not pretending that it will answer to your question on in every cases, but always keeping in mind the SRP when you are designing and implementing your agentic AI system, and that we are talking about goal oriented, not goals oriented. We are not talking about AGI. We are not talking about general AI system. We are, perhaps it will be another story for the next, I don't know, 5 years or decades, or I don't know. But we are not talking today about agents that are solving everything on Earth. We are talking about agents that are able to, for instance, manage the 5G security operation on a 5G core for a network operator. We are not solving at the same time how I'm doing cookies and how I can be able to say what will be the weather by the end of the month. I think it's super important to keep in mind the fact that it's goal driven and we are not talking about AGI if we want to be a little bit realistic.
Absolutely. And I think we need to stop here. But this is a good introduction to the next one, which in the next podcast, which is going to be about how we use this. So once we have all these agents that have their own goals, the question is, how do we put it all together? Because at some point, we have to kind of take a role in doing that.
You're
So,
100% right, Monica. And if we want to tease a bit for your audience,
mhm.
something that for me is absolutely a game changer is understanding that we as a human, if we want to take the full benefits and have the right focus, is understanding that we need to shift from AI as a tool to AI as a teammate. And when you are shifting to AI as a teammate, if you want to have the right impact on what you're doing, it will require to you to set up a new toolbox and opening a new doors that for me are very, very connected with the cognitive science that I will be absolutely delighted to talk with you, Monica, in our next call.
And we will, because I think that that's even more important than all the technology out there. If you don't know how to use it, it's just it's not very helpful. So, Philippe, thank you so much, and thank you all for listening in. And I hope you find it as enlightening and inspiring as I did. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.